But first, we will have some opening remarks by Ms. Ana Gonzalez, the Deputy Director of the U.S. Southern Command Intelligence Directorate. Ana, the pleasure to have you.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Leland, for the warm welcome, and thank you all for being here this morning. So it's really an honor and a privilege for me to join you on day 2 of the 8th annual FIU Hemispheric Security Conference. Like, what an amazing event. This is an opportunity where we get to bring together really whole of society, right? So in one room, you have academia, industry, and government, all of us together here thinking through the myriad of dynamic security challenges facing the hemisphere. This is the kind of teamwork we need for us to be able to get after this landscape that we're seeing today. So thank you to FIU, the Gordon Institute, the Latin American Caribbean Center, the Adam Smith Center, the Perry Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies, and the Atlantic Council for putting this together and enabling the kind of teamwork we need. So yesterday, we benefited from some very thought-provoking discussions and insights on the myriad of threat issues facing our hemisphere, from regional insecurity to transnational organized crime, to the challenge of strategic competition and climate change and environmental crimes. This morning, we will have the opportunity to address the effects of technology on regional security, the good, the bad, and the ugly. From the potential technology holds for improving citizens' economic opportunities and security, to building a shared understanding of threats that allows us to act in concert and deliberately. In short, the conditions to improve life for the hemisphere. And then down to the downsides of technology, such as rising cyber insecurity, the ability of criminal groups and state actors to use cyber as a means to inflict costs, as a conflict tool, to disinformation that distorts the truth, sows doubt, discredits institutions, right? Creates that uncertainty, that lack of trust that really is at the foundation of democracy and our democratic principles, and slowly chops against it every day. So as a true intelligence professional, I have to start with the bad news first. It's part of my creed, part of my breed. So let me cover now the bad and the ugly sides of technology, and then I'll end on a happier note, which is the good upsides of it. So the bad and the ugly is really how the criminal groups and autocratic governments are taking advantage of technology and using it to undermine our democratic institutions and values. So let's take transnational criminal organizations to start. If they've learned anything during the pandemic, it was really the value of diversifying their lines of business, right? So they have evolved in turning a profit on really virtually anything. So whether it's drugs, whether it's human, whether it's timber, wildlife, cigarettes, you name it, they move it. So what you're looking at is a very lucrative industry that the 200 plus criminal groups that operate in Latin America and the Caribbean, excluding Mexico, because I'm in SOUTHCOM, we don't do Mexico, basically are looking at earning about $300 billion a year in revenue. Think about that. It's very, very profitable business for them. And really, drugs are just a third of that revenue stream. The rest is all that other myriad of goods and activities I mentioned before. So we have seen over the last few years that these groups have also changed their approach to how they do business, in part enabled by the conditions in the pandemic. So the rise in using social media, apps like we're used to, like WhatsApp, using the dark web to be able to communicate with each other, advertise their wares or services more broadly. And that presents challenges for law enforcement services worldwide. They've also diversified their approach to laundering money. So they're using the benefits of the global interconnected world to partner with groups like Chinese criminal groups to move, hide, and clean their cash. So much so that Chinese money launderers are outperforming regional money launderers and becoming the principal source of laundering funds for transnational criminal organizations that operate in Latin America and the Caribbean. So they're boxing out the regional competition, and this change in behavior presents new challenges for regional law enforcement and even for US law enforcement. You have language barriers, you have a different banking system being employed, different issues that you have to deal with in order to combat the threat. And then on the other side, a state actor that's not willing to do much about it. In terms of cyber threats for the theater, they're becoming far more consequential in Latin America and the Caribbean. And last year kind of proved that with the myriad of cyber attacks we saw from different actors. Ransomware attacks, data breaches, and other forms of cybercrime are growing at the hands of state and non-state actors. Last year, we saw Russia-based Conti Group and those involved with the Wakamaya hacktivist group perpetrate cyber attacks that affected at least 6 countries and that led to millions of dollars in losses. And it really showed the vulnerability of the regional government's cyber infrastructure. And this is actually an opportunity for partnership at the government level, but also an opportunity for public-private partnership as well as we try to shore up regional security. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the Conti attack in Costa Rica, just to put more metrics on it, the attack in Costa Rica affected at least 27 government bodies. It included the healthcare sector, so ability to provide medical care to the population, to talk about furthering citizen insecurity. And then on top of that, it affected their finance ministry. And just one estimate was that in terms of imports and exports, this cyber attack cost Costa Rica $38 million a day in losses. So think about that if you multiply it across the 27 other sectors that were affected by the cyber attack, which lasted about 6 weeks. Separately, we've also seen a rise in disinformation. It's growing across the region. It's low cost. It's a tool that strategic competitors can use and autocratic governments to distort their version of events, right? To aim to undercut our democratic principles and values daily. Russian state-sponsored media in Spanish has been steadily growing in the region. So if you take RT Mundo and Sputnik en Español, they have about 31 million social media followers. If you looked at before the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, they were at 29 million. So they actually saw growth since the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. And that's significant because those media outlets are used to spew what I call like the not quite right story of events. So you'll hear a story that at the beginning sounds plausible, right? And then when the coverage starts going on, you realize like, wait, this is not reality. This is distorted. Very subtle, but very effective. And they've used those media outlets to proliferate through Latin America and the Caribbean of different versions of what's happening in Ukraine, right? So they'll tell the story that it was really NATO that was behind the attack. And then there's the other side of it, which is the bots and the trolls, right? Prolific, cheap labor, cheap technology that allows those stories to take further flight. And so those get further passed on through influencers and others across Latin America and the Caribbean. And you've all of a sudden changed the media narrative, right? So you start distorting reality. The challenge with disinformation is that it's not really revolutionary, it's evolutionary. It's drop by drop every single day over time. And that starts changing the context, right? It starts eroding at democracy and values. And it's also very hard to detect when it's happening and also to combat it, especially when you start dealing with trolls, because these are real people, they're not machines. So hard to get rid of it. Going forward, I'm particularly keeping a close eye on the evolution of deep fakes. I think that presents a challenge for us that will be game changing because it'll be even harder to tell the difference between truth and falsehoods and also be able to convince publics that what they're watching is not quite correct and present new challenges for us as national security professionals and as those that are interested in preserving the security of our hemisphere. All right, that was a lot of bad. So now I'm going to go on to the good parts about technology. So I'm very excited about our final panel today, where we're going to talk about how we're using technology to solve security challenges. I think technology, when employed judiciously and responsibly, can serve as a force multiplier for us to face that myriad of threats that we talked about yesterday during all the panels. They're diverse, they're varied, they're sophisticated. But this includes making sure that when we start using technology and new capabilities, we're going with independent, vetted vendors, that we're adding to that protocols to safeguard our data, and that we're definitely not using technology from providers that we know add backdoors to that technology. And yes, I'm talking about you, Huawei. So there are many examples in countries in Latin America that are increasing investments in technological innovation to help them detect criminal activity, shore up border security, and enable regional cooperation against shared threats. In Colombia, for example, the military has successfully used drones to monitor coca plantations and disrupt drug trafficking networks. Turning to Mexico and Peru, they both have been employing monitoring systems to track illegal movements across their borders, be it drugs, be it human smuggling and trafficking. And then turning to Jamaica, they've been using biometric identification systems to improve securities at airports, and I would add Panama and others to that list. So again, there's a lot of really good initiatives underway to mitigate some of the security shortfalls countries in the theaters have, because they're outgunned, outmanned by the criminal groups, and so technology allows them to bridge those critical gaps. Lastly, I'm a firm believer in the promise and that is held with ubiquity of commercial and publicly available data. All of this data, when paired with artificial intelligence, machine learning, holds promise for improving our ability to forecast threats and be able to act in time to prevent these challenges from becoming bigger, more complex, and more expensive to battle. And that's really critical for countries in the region whose budgets are limited. So the earlier we can act, the better. At the US Southern Command in particular, we have increasingly fused commercial imagery, working with industry and academia, openly available information, algorithms to help countries detect activities like illegal mining, illegal logging, illegal unreported and regulated fishing, as well as provide near-time real situational awareness during humanitarian disasters. So from things like wildfires to hurricanes and earthquakes. So this allows us to put in the hands of our partners information that they can use to act quickly, decisively, to save lives. So these brief remarks are really just a teaser. You're going to get the good stuff after I get off the stage. So I know the insights and perspectives we will hear will undoubtedly contribute to the development of innovative solutions and strategies that enhance security in our hemisphere. Yes, we are facing many threats and challenges, but we have the tools, the know-how, and the partnerships needed to rise to meet them. We just need to keep working together to bring valuable new technologies to the hemisphere, continue strengthening the public-private partnerships and international cooperation, and at every step, show how our adherence to democratic values and principles are the best way to build a more secure and stable Western Hemisphere. Thank you.